Hi, Anna.
Hi. So my name is Anna Howard. I work overseas in Thailand with an organization, and I work mostly with missionary children and other third culture kids, kids who live outside of their passport culture, but also kind of outside of where they live as well, like outside of the culture of their countries.
First of all, it's nice to see you and talk to you again. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm readjusting to life back in the States, so it's a lot of adjustment, but it's not too bad.
Do you miss Thailand?
Yes. Mostly
Really?
I miss how cheap all of the food is. Everything here is very expensive.
The reason why I ask you to talk today is because I've heard your testimony when we were together in Thailand for a month. Could you bring us back to when you were preparing to go to Thailand and what happened at the time?
Yeah, so I was told when I was younger that kind of in a sort of word spoken over me that the Lord and I would have a lot of inside jokes in our relationship with one another. And one of the things that he loves to bring back to me is this thing that everything comes together at the very last minute. I mean, the literally the last minutes, or the last seconds. And if anything had happened just like a minute later or, 2 seconds later, then I would have been stranded in places or I wouldn't have been able to come to Thailand, And I mean, so I've just watched so many times where he provides, but he always provides in his timing, not in my timing, which at first would have significantly lowered my stress level. You know. And the first time it happened, when I was first coming to Thailand, I had sent my passport off to get a visa. The closest Thai embassy in America is about 14 hours drive away, so I had to mail it in. So there were no like in-person interviews or anything like that, and I sent my passport in, and it took them over a month to even get it into processing. And so
Wow.
so I went to call them the Friday before I left. So I'm supposed to leave on the next Thursday, and I'm like, all right, I just need to get my passport back. It's supposed to be in registered mail, so it should be here in like 2 business days. It'll be fine if I call them on Friday. So I called them on Friday, and it's a holiday, so they're closed. Then I called them on Monday, and it's a holiday, so they're closed. Yeah, it was quite nerve-wracking. So I realized that I had exactly one more day in which I could call them and they could get my passport to me on time. So I call them on Tuesday, first thing in the morning, and I say, "Sir, I'm just gonna stay on the phone with you until I know that that thing is in the mail. I need this. It's an emergency. Please send me back my passport." So he stuck it in the mail, and then I waited. I don't know if I'd say patiently, but I waited. There wasn't anything else for me to do. And so Thursday rolls around, and my mail, our mail lady usually comes pretty pretty consistently at 11 o'clock every day. Well, today she didn't show up at 11. We had to leave no later than 1 to get to the airport on time. Well, she doesn't show up at 12.
God.
Finally, yeah. We call the post office and we ask, "Hey, have you haven't had any registered mail today?" And they say, "No, we haven't." And oh, I felt crushed. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to make my plane flight. I'm going to have to cancel all these plane tickets, which is going to be so expensive." I mean, I was so devastated by this. Well, we hear this honking from over the hill near our road, and the mail lady almost flies over the hill, and she like swings as fast as she can into our driveway, and she runs out with a package, and she goes, "I have it, I have it, I have it." And apparently she had taken it before they had checked it in at the mailbox, so they didn't know it
Wow.
was there. And so she shows up 5 minutes before we had to leave, before I would miss my flight. And it was very nerve wracking. And I felt bad because I did break down and I didn't trust there at the end. I mean, by all human logic, it makes sense that I would break down, but in the scheme of God and his infinite wisdom, it doesn't make a lot of sense that I would have felt like he hadn't done enough. I mean, he raised all the money in like a month, and he did all sorts of things for me, and I didn't have the faith to believe there at that last minute, and it crushed me realizing that I had like kind of, I felt like I had failed him because I didn't have faith there at the end. The next year, he waited till 6 a.m. the day that I had to leave to raise all the money. That was crazy.
Wow.
I went to Laos for a visa run, and um, it was only supposed to take 2 days to get the visa, and it ended up taking four. And we had to get to the plane that afternoon. And we walk in there to pick up our visas that have had problem after problem after problem. And the first thing that the embassy says to me is, "We have to have an interview with you." And I'm like,
Mm.
"But I really need to get to the airport." Like, I really need to get. So the two other missionaries I was with, they got their passports, and so they held me back and had an interview with me, and it was very nerve wracking. But I just kind of prayed, and I was like, "All right, you know what, Lord, I'm just going to trust that even if I have to stay here overnight again, you're gonna just get me through this." I was like, I don't know how long this is gonna take, but eventually, I'm just gonna trust that, like, if you want me to sleep at the airport, it's what's gonna happen. you know and yeah. You guys have to leave or else you're gonna miss your flight, and I don't want you guys to miss your flight for me. It's okay, you guys just go. I'll stay here and wait for my passport. Well, no sooner had they walked out the door than the lady comes up with my passport, and I'm like, "Thank you so much," and I like pay her, and I run out the door, and they are literally driving past me in the taxi. Um,
What?
and I'm like, "Wait!" And praise God, there wasn't a car in the street because I would have gotten hit. I did not look both ways before crossing the road. I was just like, "Wait!" And they literally stopped like a few feet from me. So if it had been 1 second later, they would have gone on without me, and I would have had to have
Oh,
gone by myself. Luckily, that time though, I felt very calm through the whole thing, and I realized it was just because the Lord had been molding my faith through all of these instances of last minute, preparation, and all of these times where he did everything in his own time, not in my time.
why did you come to Thailand? Why Thailand?
I'm not entirely sure at what point in my life I felt called to Asia, and I really didn't think I was going to go to Thailand first. I actually had friends with a different ministry who were living in Thailand, and when I talked to them about their ministry, I just felt a real pushback from the Lord on joining them, which I think is really interesting because I don't believe that there's a problem at all with their ministry, but the Lord obviously wanted me to go to a different one. I have enjoyed my time with my organization significantly more than I would have if I had gone with them, but they were in Thailand at the time, and somehow the Lord just kept opening doors for Thailand, even though I wasn't going with my friends, even though I didn't know anybody in Thailand other than these people who were not living in the city that I was being pulled to. It's very strange, it was a huge leap of faith because left the when I left the airport, I didn't even know who was gonna pick me up. I didn't even have a picture of the person who was supposed to pick me up at the airport. So um, luckily, she had a sign that said "Welcome, Anna." So I was like, "All right, that's for me." I felt called to ministry with third culture kids, with missionary children specifically because, like, I had a friend of mine who worked with mission, and then when his family came back, he had a lot of parental issues and has since ceased walking with the Lord. And it breaks my heart a little bit because his parents were so sure that this is where the Lord wanted them. And I still believe that the Lord did a lot of good through them, but he I feel like he didn't get enough support from either their ministry or in some way when he came back. I'm not really sure. There are multiple things that could have happened that could have influenced his decisions in life, but in the long run, because of him, I felt really called to working with international children, so it's kind of what I do.
How long did you stay in Thailand, by the way?
I was in Thailand for 2 years. 1 year I was living in a dorm with a bunch of international children, and the second year I was living on my own, teaching international children, kind of getting them both ready uh, so I was teaching at a school for missionary children so that they could be both academically and spiritually ready, kind of, to go back to their passport countries for college, because a lot of them have been homeschooled by their parents for years, and they don't understand the peer pressures that are going to come when they go back to their passport countries. So yeah, a lot of what my job was is to prepare them for, like, give them good coping mechanisms for, moving on and going to, places that they hadn't been in many, many years or didn't feel a lot of connection to.
What are the challenges of, your job?
So my first year was a lot more of mentorship. I was working in a dorm, and I didn't really have a lot of teaching. It's like teaching in itself. Most of it was, mentoring, kind of being a big sister to a lot of these kids. And I'm still in communication. I write postcards to them all the time. So I still communicate with them. I write a lot of postcards. I guess to answer your question about challenges, I think one of the biggest challenges is especially my second year, because the first year I was living in a dorm with 15 people and it was really nice. I mean, it was hard because you were constantly living with these people and kind of having to learn how to live with many, many different cultures. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. And the second year, I think the biggest challenge was that I was suddenly living on my own, and I couldn't really be with the dorm kids all the time, even though I wanted to, because they had a new dorm assistant who came in, and I wanted to allow them to make that same connection with him. My problem was is that that left me with, like, no friends. Yeah, one of the biggest challenges I think was just feeling very lonely coming back, because I was suddenly living all by myself, which I'd never done before. I mean, I was either living in college in a dorm room setting, or I was living in a family of six. So it was, it's always kind of like I've never been completely alone.
I think in some way I can relate to them because they always move a lot. You have to adjust yourself over and over again, and at one point it can be very draining and exhausting.
Well, I do think that my experience with that friend of mine that I was telling you about, he definitely opened my eyes to the issues a lot of children in the ministry were struggling with. And so when I lived in the dorm, several of the children had some issues with their parents. Just in the sense that, like, maybe their parents, and I mean, this is not saying that anybody's not following the Lord's calling, but it is kind of hard sometimes because, the parents also want to be focused on their ministry. um, and the children understand that. I believe the children totally get that, but sometimes it does leave, almost subconsciously, this desire to be really independent. And so while I was at the dorm, a lot of the problems that we were having were children who had suddenly not had dorm rules before, being
Mm.
subject to these things, and they would react very strongly and aggressively towards any person in authority, such as myself or the dorm parents. I stopped taking it personally after a while, because I realized that a lot of the issues that I was seeing weren't directed at me. They were directed at something else, and I was just taking the beating for it. And I realized it wasn't personal. And so when I stopped reacting like it was personal, they started opening up a little bit more. I think it was just really important for me not to take any of their things personally. And it was very important to just listen, listen and try to understand. I think was the biggest. Those are like the two biggest things. When a parent feels called to the mission field, sometimes, if it really is truly from the Lord, then He will call the whole family, not just the parents, but He will also call the kids. And I think it's so important for parents to keep communicating with their children about what's going on and about what they feel like the Lord is calling them to, and asking their children to be a part of their ministry with them. Several of the kids that I knew did feel very part of their own parents' ministry, and they understood. And I think it was because their parents were incredibly open with them about, like, what they felt like the Lord was wanting them to do. Whereas there were other parents that I know of that did not communicate very well, and kind of just, I hate to use the word, ripped them out of their homes and onto the mission field at an age in which they were already experiencing a lot of transition, because of their age. And those children oftentimes felt a lot of anger towards their parents and a lot of resentment at suddenly just being like dragged halfway across the world to suddenly talk to people and be in places that they didn't know and have to make new friends, and it was really hard for a lot of those kids to do that. One of my pastors one time told me that about 75% of like TCKs or missionary children will usually walk away from the faith. Now it doesn't give me the statistic on how many come back, but I think a
Mm.
lot of that is just because there isn't a lot of communication between the parents and the children, and it's really important. And so part of my job is to give the children good coping mechanisms because their faith may be strong while they're on the field, but when they go back to their passport countries, they go to places that they don't feel very invested, and suddenly they're there by themselves as college students. They are treated like equals, but they don't understand what that means, and so they're pressured in. Like sometimes they can be pressured into things. Sometimes they can just want to be experimental. I don't know. Yeah, I mean it happens to
Yeah.
all of us. I think I think most college kids, when they go to college, they feel the need to like expand your horizons. If I can speak God's word and I can tell them things that maybe they'd never thought of, or give them some insight into the cultures that they're going back to that maybe they didn't know about, and now they can be better prepared for it. I think that's my whole like mission, is to just prepare them for life, pretty much, especially life away from the field.
What are other struggles that you faced when you were in Thailand?
I'm a very opinionated person. I think I realize that sometimes my strong opinions coming out were very negatively received by people of certain cultures.
Okay.
From even peers, people that I was working with, I dealt with a lot of passive aggression, and just learning to forgive those people. That was definitely one of those things. That was something that I had had experience in the workplace before, and I really think that the Lord was using that to prepare me for the mission field. Because I think if I had not had like 8 years of working with passive aggressive people in America, I don't think I would have been able to do it. Working
Yeah.
with like multiple cultures, all these different like cultures coming together, and suddenly I'm like, everybody has their different ways of like reacting to me. In the conference that you and I attended, we did a cultural learning. While Americans are pretty vocal about their opinions, they're actually hesitant to be really direct because they are afraid of offending people. And I was like, that's very interesting. And I remember that question that we were put to, where if a boss says maybe, what does that mean?
Oh.
And we're like all of the Americans and all of the like Asians and South Africans and like everybody who is there in our conference is like, yeah, that's a no. Like that's kind of putting off a no. It's like it's not really telling you no. And then all the people from Europe were like, what? That's a yes. And that shocked me in their culture, because I thought that like America and Europe was a little bit closer than that, in the sense that like we all kind of come from the same like ethnic and cultural background. But the fact that the culture has evolved so much to be less forward, I thought was really fascinating.
I mean, a lot of people are moving towards to believing in science, facts, and then you came to Thailand where everything is very spiritual.
It was a little shocking at first. Now I never really experienced culture shock, and I think it's because I expected it to be worse than it was. Because I had been to South America several times, and while they're very religious, like they're all very Catholic in South America, they're not. They don't believe in karma. And
Mm.
so when I was in South America, people will be very, very, very nice to your face, but there's a lot of stealing and thievery going around, and mugging, and like all sorts of crime. But when I get to Thailand, I found out that like none of these things happen. I mean, there's still a lot of crime in Thailand, and it takes form in much more secretive things, but like stealing is not one of them. I did not fear for myself going out at night by alone. And so, being from America, where I do carry, like a knife or something like that whenever I was downtown, just for self-defense. Going to a place like Thailand where it just wasn't necessary was such a different thing because in Thailand, they definitely believe in the karma aspect of it. So they believe like if you steal, you're going to get bad karma, and I found it kind of refreshing and a little bit humbling because I was sitting here going, well, America is maybe not so much anymore, but used to be a very, Christian oriented background. And we've never been like this, like we've never been this concerned with other people's welfare and other people's property. Also, the fact that there are tons of street dogs, but they're taken care of. They're street dogs. But like when it got cold, they all like I woke up one morning and it was kind of chilly outside, and I walked outside and all the street dogs had sweaters on. That made me feel so sweet. I was like, wow, look at how much people care about these. And again, it does come from a very dark, superstitious place, and it makes me very sad that people do feel that superstitious. But, as somebody who had been expecting like a lot more crime, I guess, because of my experience in Brazil, suddenly I was like, wow, this place is like amazing. But, I think it still comes from a lot of fear, and a lot of superstition. And so it does make me very sad, especially to see all of the like spirit houses on the street corners that,
Oh, yeah.
they feel determined to make sacrifices to. And, I feel bad for Thai Christians because their bosses will still make them put sacrifices out there, regardless of their own personal beliefs, because the employer is so superstitious that he won't allow his employees to practice their own religion.
When we're talking about, their superstitions, did that scare you at first?
I started more feeling sad for people that they felt so scared of things, that they felt like they had to have a spirit house on every street corner, that they felt like they had to, that they felt like they saw ghosts all the time and that they could be haunted at any point if they weren't careful, and I hate that people do live, in such fear, because it's crippling in some instances. I mean, it prevents them from being able to do many things, from being at peace internally. There are a few stereotypes of like it's very hard for somebody who looks like me to witness to Thai people, because a lot of what happens is, and I mean, this happens with a lot of, I think this happens with a lot of cultures in Asia, where it's like you go and you ask them if they want to accept Jesus into their heart, and they said, yeah, of course. But then like you don't actually know if it's penetrated all the way to their heart, because they're just saying to be nice and to be kind, even though there have been missionaries for, hundreds of years, well, 200 years or so, it's still 99% Buddhist, and I do believe it comes from kind of the family pressure, because to become Christian, you're pretty much turning your back. Like that's the way that the family feels, is that you're turning your back on the family. They were other missionaries who were there. They were only short term, so they'd been there about a month, and they were teaching English at a school for monk children. So basically, little boys who were going to become monks when they were older. And they were teaching for like weeks and weeks and weeks, and they saw no fruit from it at all. And then the last day, they asked all the kids, like, "Would you like to accept Jesus into your heart?" And all of the children said yes. But I didn't.
Oh,
Yeah, and they were so excited about it, and I didn't really like. I felt bad for the two American girls I was talking to, because I knew why they had said yes, because it was their last day, and that the boys were, wanting to still make that connection, and thought like, well, maybe they'll keep in touch, or like let's make all of these missionaries happy and say yes, but I didn't tell the girls this because they were so excited, but I was sitting there and I was a little skeptical about whether or not they actually had seen those numbers. There are many places in which, somebody from an Asian culture is going to be a significantly better witness than me, because they won't listen to me. It is harder if you look European, or if you look different, to really minister, because like they don't think of me as being approachable. They think of me as like, wow, somebody's talking to me that's not from like my culture, not from my cultural background, and it becomes distracting almost. I saw this while I was in Brazil as well, because while I was there, I was trying to witness to these five little children. They were homeless children on the streets, and I kept trying to like, we did this one dance and drama that's specifically meant for kids, and so I tried to minister to them after that. It took me 3 times just to get them to hear what I was saying, because they were so distracted by the fact that I was speaking in English. I mean, it mattered what I looked like, but like just the fact that I was speaking in English. And so my friend was translating for me, but they weren't listening to him. They were just listening to me trying to figure out what I was saying, even though he was translating it into Portuguese.
Maybe you can mention one or two Bible verses that helped you to get through all of your hardships or experience in Thailand.
It's First Thessalonians 5:14 says, "And we urge you, brothers, admonish the idle, encourage the faint-hearted, help the weak, and be patient with them all." And to me, that's like the Bible verse that I kind of took as my mantra for, or like my motto for going overseas is like, and it keeps going, about like rejoicing always, pray without ceasing, give thanks in all circumstances, all those things. And I love that verse so much because it just keeps going. Even if the person that you absolutely despise was the last person on earth, Jesus still would have died for them.
Oh, that's a good one. Thank you so much, Anna. Really, I enjoyed talking with you, and thank you for sharing your testimony. This is it. This is the end of the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you, Anna, once again for and with Anna.